The Listeners by Walter de la Mare. "Is there anybody there?" said the traveler, knocking on the moonlit door, and his horse in the silence champed the grass of the forest's ferny floor. And a bird flew up out of the turret above the traveler's head, and he smote upon the door again a second time. "Is there anybody there?" he said. But no one descended to the traveler. No head from the leafy fringed sill leaned over and looked into his gray eyes, where he stood perplexed and still. But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in a lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men, stood thronging the faint moonbeams on that dark stair that goes down to the empty hall, hearkening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveler's call. And he felt in his heart their strangeness, their stillness answering his cry, while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf, 'neath the starred and leafy sky. For suddenly he smote on the door, even louder, and lifted his head. "Tell them I came, and no one answered, that I kept my word," he said. Never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through the shadowiness of the still house from one man left awake. Aye, they heard his foot upon the stirrup, and the sound of iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backward when the plunging hooves were gone. A Ballad of John Silver by John Masefield. We were schooner-rigged and rakish, with a long and lissom hull, and we flew the pretty colors of the crossbones in the skull. We'd a big black Jolly Roger flapping grimly at the fore, and we sailed the Spanish water in the happy days of yore. We'd a long grass gun amidships, like a well-conducted ship. We had each a brace of pistols and a cutlass at the hip. It's a point which tells against us, and a fact to be deplored. But we chased the goodly merchantmen and laid their ships aboard. Then the dead men fouled the scuppers, and the wounded filled the chains, and the paintwork was all splattered-dashed with other people's brains. She was boarded, she was looted, she was scuttled till she sank, and the pale survivors left us by the medium of the plank. Oy, then it was, while standing by the taffrail on the poop, we could hear the drowning folk lament the absent chicken coop. Then, having watched the blood away, we'd little else to do than to dance a quiet hornpipe as the old salts taught us to. Oy, the fiddle on the forecastle, and the slapping naked soles, and the genial down the middle Jake and curtsy when she rolls, with the silver seas around us, and the pale moon overhead, and the lookout not a-looking, and his pipe bowl glowing red. Ah, the pig-tailed quitting pirates, and the pretty pranks we played, all have since been put a stop to by the naughty Board of Trade. The schooners and the merry crews are laid away to rest, a little south the sunset in the islands of the blest.
Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Listen, my child, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April, in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower, as a signal light, one if by land, and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with a muffled oar silently rowed to the Charleston shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset British man-of-war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile his friend through the alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to the boats on the shore. Then he climbed to the tower of the church, up the wooden stairs with stealthy tread, to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the sombre rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade. By the trembling ladder, steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roofs of the town, and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath in the churchyard lay the dead, in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind, as it went creeping along tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, all is well. A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats in the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazing on the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the Old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and sombre and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes, till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hooves in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles, in passing, a spark, struck out by a steed that flies fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet through the gleam and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night. And the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steed, and beneath him tranquil and broad and deep is the mystic meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, as heard the tramp of a steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises when the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows, blank and bare, gaze at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadow's brow. And one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In the books you have read how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball, from behind every fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then across the fields to emerge again, under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and reload. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the night, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For borne on that night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed, and the midnight message of Paul Revere.
We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar. We wear the mask with grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but, O great Christ, our cries to Thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask.
Birches by Robert Frost. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them, loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises, and turn many-colored as their stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods, years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground, like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them, over their heads to dry in the summer. But I was going to say, when Truth broke in, with all her matter-of-fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them, as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was with what he had found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees by writing them down over and over again, until he took the stiffness out of them. And not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the trees away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup, up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once, myself a swinger of birches, and so do I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs, broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it, and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me, and half grant me what I wish, snatch me away, not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree, and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk, toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One would do worse than be a swinger of birches.
To a Skylark by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart in profuse strains of unpremeditated art.
Higher still and higher from the earth thou springest, like a cloud of fire, the blue deep thou wingest, and singing still dost soar, and soaring ever singest.
And the golden lightning of the sunken sun, o'er which clouds are brightening, thou dost float and run, like an unembodied joy whose race is just begun.
The pale purple even melts around thy flight, like a star of heaven in the broad daylight. Thou art unseen, but yet I hear thy shrill delight.
Keen as are the arrows of that silver sphere, whose intense lamp narrows in the white dawn clear, until we hardly see, we feel that it is there.
All the earth and air with thy voice is loud, as when night is bare for one lonely cloud. The moon rains out her beams, and heaven is overflowed.
What thou art we know not, what is most like thee. From rainbow clouds there flow not drops so bright to see, as from thy presence showers a rain of melody.
Like a poet hidden in the light of thought, singing hymns unbidden, till the world is wrought to sympathy with hopes and fears it heeded not.
Like a high-born maiden in a palace tower, soothing her love-laden soul in secret hour, with music sweet as love, which overflows her bower.
Like a glowworm golden in a dell of dew, scattering unbeholden its aerial hue, among the flowers and grass which screen it from the view.
Like a rose embowered in its own green leaves, by warm winds deflowered, till the scent it gives makes faint with too much sweet those heavy winged thieves.
Sound of vernal showers on the twinkling grass, rain awakened flowers, all that ever was, joyous and clear and fresh, thy music doth surpass.
Teach us, sprite or bird, what sweet thoughts are thine. I have never heard praise of love or wine that panted forth a flood of rapture so divine.
Chorus hymeneal or triumphal chant, matched with thine would be all but an empty vaunt, a thing wherein we feel there is some hidden want.
What objects are the fountains of thy happy strain? What fields or waves or mountains? What shapes of sky or plain? What love of thine own kind? What ignorance of pain?
With thy clear, keen joyance, languor cannot be. Shadow of annoyance never came near thee. Thou lovest, but ne'er knew love's sad satiety.
Waking or asleep, thou of death must deem things more true and deep than we mortals dream. Or how could thy notes flow in such a crystal stream?
We look before and after, and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught. our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought.
Yet if we could scorn hate and pride and fear, if we were things born not to shed a tear, I know not how thy joy we ever should come near.
Better than all measures of delightful sound, better than all treasures that in books are found, thy skill to poet were, thou scorner of the ground.
Teach me half the gladness that thy brain must know, such harmonious madness from my lips would flow. The world should listen then, as I am listening now.
I'm Nobody. Who Are You? By Emily Dickinson. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell, they'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog, to tell one's name the livelong June to an admiring bog.
Meeting at Night by Robert Browning. The gray sea and the long black land, and the yellow half moon large and low, and the startled little waves that leap in fiery ringlets from their sleep, as I gain the cove with pushing prow, and quench its speed in the slushy sand. Then a mile of warm sea-scented beach, 3 fields to cross till a farm appears. A tap at the pane, the quick, sharp scratch, and blue spurt of a lighted match, and a voice less loud through its joys and fears than the 2 hearts beating, each to each.
The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carrol. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd, because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily, because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. cabbage and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The carpenter said nothing, but cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The carpenter said nothing, but the butter spread too thick. I weep for you, the walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the carpenter, we've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But answer came there none, and this was scarcely odd, because they had eaten every one. Goblet of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Filled is life's goblet to the brim, and though my eyes with tears are dim, I see its sparkling bubbles swim, and chant a melancholy hymn with solemn voice and slow. No purple flowers, no garlands green conceal the goblet's shade or sheen, nor maddening draughts of hippocrene, like gleams of sunshine, flash between thick leaves of mistletoe. This goblet, wrought with curious art, is filled with waters that upstart when the deep fountains of the heart, by strong convulsions rent apart, are running all to waste. And as it mantling passes round, with fennel is it wreathed and crowned, whose seed and foliage sun embrowned are in its waters steeped and browned, and give a bitter taste. Above the lowly plants it towers, the fennel with its yellow flowers, and in an early age than ours was gifted with wondrous powers lost vision to restore. It gave new strength and fearless mood, and gladiators fierce and rude mingled it in their daily food, and he who battled and subdued a wreath of fennel wore. Then in life's goblet freely press the leaves that give it bitterness, nor prize the colored waters less, for in thy darkness and distress new light and strength they give. And he who has not learned to know how false its sparkling bubbles show, how bitter are the drops of woe with which its brim may overflow, he has not learned to live. The prayer of Ajax was for light. Through all that dark and desperate fight, the blackness of the noonday night, he asked for the return of sight, to see his foeman's face. Let our unceasing earnest prayer be too for light, for strength to bear a portion of the weight of care that crushes into dumb despair one half of the human race. O suffering sad humanity, O ye afflicted one, who lie steeped in the lips of misery, longing and yet afraid to die, patient though sorely tried. I pledge you in this cup of grief, where floats the fennel's bitter leaf. The battle of our life is brief, the alarm, the struggle, the relief. Then sleep we side by side.
The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries the silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Success is Counted Sweetest by Emily Dickinson. Success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed. To comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. Not one of all the purple host who took the flag today can tell the definition so clear of victory. As he defeated, dying, on those forbidden ear, the distant strains of triumph burst agonized and clear.
Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay.
I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman. I hear America singing, the varied carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be blithe and strong, the carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam, the mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work, the boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat, the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck, the shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench, the hatter singing as he stands, the woodcutter's song, the plowboy's on his way in the morning, or at noon, intermission, or at sundown, the delicious singing of the mother, or the young wife at work, or of the girls sewing or washing, each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else. The day what belongs to the day, at night the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong, melodious songs. If, by Rudyard Kipling. If you keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build 'em up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds, and shall find me, unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you for listening to Rain in the Garden at the Alber Inn. If there are poems you would like us to read here, please join our Discord channel and let us know. May joy find you throughout this week. Goodbye.